Dear friend, you're sitting there now, aren't you? Maybe in your favorite chair by the window, or perhaps out on the porch where the breeze carries whispers from the past. You've lived 6 decades or more, long enough to know that life doesn't come with an instruction manual, long enough to see how quickly years slip through our fingers like sand. And yet, here we are, still trying to make sense of it all. Let me start by telling you something I wish someone had told me when I was younger. Stop chasing perfection. It's a thief, my friend. A quiet one that sneaks into our lives disguised as ambition and leaves us hollow. For most of my life, I chased it relentlessly, thinking it would bring me peace. What it brought instead was regret. Years wasted, moments missed, relationships strained, all because I thought perfect was just around the corner. If only I worked harder, planned better, tried longer. I'm writing this letter today not to lecture, but to share what 90 years have taught me about letting go of that impossible dream. Because at our age, we don't have time for illusions anymore. We need truth, the kind that sets us free. In this letter, I want to walk you through some habits, realizations, and small shifts in perspective that can help you reclaim joy, even now. Joy that has nothing to do with being perfect and everything to do with simply being. When I look back on my 20s, 30s, even 40s, I cringe at how much energy I poured into making things flawless. My career, my home, my family, it all had to be just right. Do you remember those days? The endless hours spent polishing details no one else noticed. The sleepless nights worrying over decisions that seemed monumental at the time, but feel trivial now. Here's the thing, perfection isn't real. It never was. But oh, how convincing it can be when you're young and full of fire. I remember once spending weeks preparing for a dinner party. Not just any dinner party, a grand affair meant to impress colleagues and friends. Every dish had to be exquisite, every flower arrangement symmetrical, every conversation sparkling. When the night finally arrived, I was so tense I barely enjoyed myself. One guest spilled red wine on the carpet, and I nearly cried, not because of the stain, but because it felt like proof that I'd failed at creating something perfect. Looking back, I realize how absurd that was. Those guests didn't care about the symmetry of the flowers or whether the roast chicken was cooked to Michelin star standards. They came for connection, for laughter, stories, warmth. But I couldn't see that then. All I could see was the gap between reality and my unattainable ideal. Does that sound familiar? Have you ever found yourself striving for something that felt just out of reach, only to discover later that the effort cost far more than it was worth? If so, you're not alone. So many of us fall into this trap, believing that perfection will validate us, protect us, or somehow make us worthy of love and respect. But here's the truth. Perfection doesn't exist, and chasing it only robs us of the beauty of imperfection. Now, before you think I'm suggesting we throw up our hands and stop caring altogether, let me clarify. There's a difference between doing our best and demanding flawlessness. Doing your best means showing up, putting in the effort and accepting the outcome, even if it's messy. Demanding flawlessness means tying yourself in knots over things that ultimately don't matter. And trust me, I've been tied in plenty of knots. One of the hardest lessons I've learned is that imperfection is where life happens. Think about it. The best memories you have probably aren't picture perfect. They're the ones where something went wrong, but everyone laughed anyway. The vacation where the hotel lost your reservation, so you ended up staying at a quirky little inn instead. The holiday meal that burned, forcing you to order pizza. These moments stick with us because they remind us that life isn't about control, it's about connection. For years, I resisted this idea. I wanted control. I wanted certainty. But the older I got, the clearer it became that neither exists. Life is unpredictable, messy, and gloriously imperfect. And the sooner we embrace that, the happier we'll be. There's another side to this too, one that hits closer to home as we grow older. Chasing perfection often keeps us from fully experiencing the present moment. When we're constantly focused on what could be better, we miss what's already good. I think about the times I sat beside my children when they were young, mentally critiquing how I parented instead of soaking in their laughter, or the evenings I spent grading papers late into the night, wishing I'd done more instead of enjoying the quiet comfort of my own company. Do you ever catch yourself doing that? Holding back from savoring the moment because it's not quite enough? Let me tell you, friend, it is enough. This moment right now is enough. The wrinkles on your face, the creak in your knees, the memories both sweet and bittersweet, they're all part of who you are, and who you are is enough. That brings us to something else I think you'll find helpful. Something deeper, something that ties all of this together. Because while letting go of perfection sounds simple, actually living it requires a shift, not just in behavior, but in mindset. And that's where we'll pick up next. Until then, take a deep breath. Look around you. Notice the light streaming through the windows, the way the trees sway in the wind, the rhythm of your own heartbeat. These are the things that truly matter. Not perfection, but presence. Dear friend, let's sit together for a moment, shall we? Imagine you're here with me now. Two old souls sharing stories over tea or coffee. We've already talked about the weight of perfection and how it shaped so much of our lives without us even realizing it. But let's dig deeper into what happens when we finally begin to loosen its grip. Because letting go isn't just an act, it's a process. A quiet liberation that unfolds in ways both expected and surprising. One of the most freeing realizations I've had is this: imperfection doesn't diminish us, it humanizes us. For years, I thought mistakes were failures, signs that I wasn't good enough. But now I see them differently. Mistakes are proof that we're alive, that we're trying. They're the fingerprints of effort, not evidence of inadequacy. And oh, how beautiful they can be if we let them. Take my garden, for instance. When I first started planting flowers decades ago, I was determined to create something flawless. Every row had to be straight, every bloom symmetrical. If a plant grew crooked or a leaf turned brown, I'd rip it out and start again. It was exhausting, and honestly, it didn't look any better than gardens tended by people who simply let nature take its course. Then one year, I stopped fighting it. I planted seeds wherever there was space, watered them when I remembered, and let the sun and rain do the rest. That summer, my garden burst into life in ways I never could have planned. Wildflowers sprouted where I hadn't sown anything at all. Vines climbed trellises in chaotic patterns. Bees buzzed lazily from blossom to blossom. It wasn't perfect. It was alive. and that made all the difference. Isn't that true of so many things? Our families, our friendships, our dreams. They thrive not because we control every detail, but because we allow room for growth, for surprises, for imperfections. Trying to micromanage life only leaves us frustrated and disconnected. Letting go, on the other hand, opens doors we didn't know existed. Now, let me share another story, one that might hit closer to home. Do you remember the last time you apologized for something you didn't need to apologize for? Maybe it was a harmless comment at dinner that you later worried sounded rude. Or perhaps it was a gift you gave that wasn't as extravagant as you thought it should be. How often have you said, "I'm sorry," not because you did something wrong, but because you feared falling short of someone else's expectations? For years, I carried this habit like a heavy coat I couldn't take off. I apologized for everything, for being late, for speaking my mind, for existing, it seemed. What I didn't realize was that each apology chipped away at my sense of self-worth. Each "I'm sorry" whispered, "You're not enough." Over time, those whispers grew louder until they drowned out the voice inside me that used to say, "You are exactly who you're meant to be." Learning to stop apologizing unnecessarily has been one of the most profound shifts in my life. It hasn't been easy. Old habits die hard, but it's been worth it. Now, instead of saying "I'm sorry," I try to say "thank you." Thank you for understanding. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Gratitude feels lighter, doesn't it? It lifts us up rather than pulling us down. Have you ever noticed how much easier it is to forgive others than it is to forgive ourselves? We extend grace to friends, children, even strangers, yet we hold ourselves to impossible standards. Why is that? Why do we reserve our harshest criticism for the person in the mirror? When I turned 65, I decided to make peace with myself. Not overnight, that would be too perfect, but gradually, bit by bit. I began by writing letters to my younger self. At first, they were filled with advice. Don't work so hard. Spend more time with your kids. Stop worrying about what other people think. But eventually, the tone shifted. Instead of lecturing, I started thanking her for her courage, her resilience, her willingness to keep going even when she felt lost. Those letters became a bridge between who I was and who I am now. They reminded me that I've always been doing the best I could with what I had. Isn't that true of all of us? There's another layer to this journey toward embracing imperfection, and it's one that becomes especially important as we grow older. Learning to celebrate progress, not perfection. You know what I mean. Think about the goals you set for yourself. Big ones, small ones, personal ones, professional ones. How often did you achieve them exactly as you imagined? Probably rarely, if ever. Yet somehow we convince ourselves that anything less than flawless execution is failure. But here's the truth. Progress is success. Even the smallest step forward matters. I learned this lesson during a particularly difficult season of my life. After retiring, I struggled to find purpose. Without the structure of work, I felt adrift, unsure of how to fill my days. So I decided to learn something new: painting. I bought supplies, watched tutorials, and set up a little studio in the corner of my living room. My first attempts were, well, let's just say they weren't museum-worthy. In fact, they were downright laughable. At first, I wanted to quit. Who was I kidding, thinking I could become an artist at my age? But then I realized something. Every brush stroke, no matter how clumsy, brought me closer to improvement. Every mistake taught me something valuable. Slowly, painfully, joyfully, I got better. Not perfect, but better. And along the way, I discovered something even more important than skill. The sheer pleasure of creating something with my own hands. That's what progress looks like, my friend. It's messy and non-linear, but it's real. It's showing up, putting in the effort and trusting that growth will happen, even if it's slower than we'd like. It's celebrating the journey, not just the destination. Now, before I finish this letter, there's one more thing I need to tell you. Something that ties all of these threads together and brings us back to where we started. The cost of chasing perfection. Because while we've talked about the freedom of letting go, we haven't yet explored the deepest price we pay when we cling to unattainable ideals. And that, dear friend, is where the heart of this story lies. Dear friend, here we are again, you and I, sharing this quiet space where the years between us seem to blur. We've walked through the weight of perfection, the liberation of letting go, and the beauty of embracing imperfection. But now, let's turn our attention to something that cuts deeper, the true cost of chasing perfection. Because while it may seem like a harmless pursuit at first, it leaves scars that run far beneath the surface. For most of my life, I didn't realize how much perfection was costing me. Not just in terms of time or energy, but in relationships, joy, and even my sense of self. Let me tell you about a moment that changed everything for me. It happened on a crisp autumn afternoon, the kind where the air smells faintly of wood smoke and fallen leaves crunch underfoot. I was sitting on a bench in the park watching children play. Their laughter carried across the open field, bright and unguarded. And suddenly I felt it, a sharp pang of longing. I wasn't longing for childhood itself, though there were certainly parts of it I missed. No, what I longed for was the freedom those children had. The freedom to be utterly themselves without apology, without judgment, without fear of falling short. They ran wild, tripped over their own feet, and got back up again without hesitation. They didn't worry about being good enough, because they hadn't yet learned to question their worth. And in that moment, I realized how much I'd lost by spending decades trying to prove mine. Chasing perfection steals that freedom from us. It teaches us to second-guess every decision, to hide our flaws, to silence our authentic voices. Over time, it erodes our confidence and convinces us that love and acceptance must be earned. Do you know what I mean? Have you ever found yourself holding back in a relationship, whether with a partner, a friend, or even yourself, because you feared rejection if they saw the real you? I remember one conversation with my daughter when she was a teenager. She came home from school upset, tears streaming down her face. When I asked what was wrong, she told me she'd been excluded from a group project because her ideas weren't good enough. My heart broke for her, but as I listened, I realized she wasn't just talking about schoolwork. She was internalizing the same message I'd unknowingly passed down to her, that her value depended on meeting impossible standards. In that moment, I vowed to do better for her and for myself. I started by telling her the truth, that no one is ever truly good enough by the world's standards, and that's okay. What matters isn't perfection, it's authenticity. It's showing up as your whole self, flaws and all, and trusting that the people who matter will love you anyway. Those words felt foreign on my tongue at first, but over time, they became a lifeline for both of us. Now, here's the hardest part to admit. Chasing perfection doesn't just hurt us. It hurts the people around us too. I think about the times I prioritized work over family, believing that providing materially would make up for my emotional absence. Or the moments I withheld affection because I thought I needed to deserve it first. Looking back, I see how lonely I made myself, and how lonely I made others feel in return. But healing is possible. It starts with forgiveness, not just for ourselves, but for those we've hurt along the way. A few years ago, I sat down with my son and apologized for the times I'd pushed him too hard, criticized him unfairly, or failed to celebrate his unique gifts. He listened quietly, then smiled and said, "Dad, I already forgave you years ago, but thank you for saying it." That moment stays with me because it reminded me of something powerful. Forgiveness isn't just about absolving guilt. It's about reclaiming connection. It's about choosing to move forward together, imperfectly but wholeheartedly. And isn't that what life is really about? Not achieving some mythical ideal, but building meaningful relationships that sustain us through the ups and downs. As we near the end of this letter, I want to leave you with one final thought. One that I hope will stay with you long after you've finished reading. Life is fleeting, my friend. Fleeting and fragile and achingly beautiful. The older we get, the more aware we become of its brevity. But instead of letting that awareness paralyze us, let it inspire us to live fully, deeply, authentically. Let it remind us that every moment is a gift, not because it's perfect, but because it's ours. So here's my challenge to you. Take one step today toward letting go of perfection. Maybe it's forgiving yourself for something you've been carrying too long. Maybe it's reaching out to someone you've drifted apart from and saying, "I miss you." Or maybe it's simply sitting still for a few minutes, breathing deeply and allowing yourself to exist exactly as you are. Whatever it is, trust that it matters. Trust that it's enough. If this letter has spoken to you, I'd be honored if you shared it with someone you care about. These conversations are too important to keep to ourselves. And if you're new here, consider subscribing. It means the world to me to know that these words are finding their way into hearts like yours. Until next time, take care of that beautiful soul of yours. Remember, you don't have to be perfect. To be loved, you never did. With warmth and gratitude, your elder friend.